CockroachDB's self-healing capabilities. I deployed 4 nodes on Cockroach Cloud Dedicated in the EU Central 1 region, and there we have actually just 3 availability zones. And Cockroach by default is distributed across the availability zones within a given region. Hence, we end up with a scenario where we have like 2 availability zones with 1 node each, and 1 availability zone which runs 2 nodes. Which is why if we look on the overview page at the replicas column, we see that we have a total of 100 replicas currently in the system. And because 1 availability zone is running 2 nodes, they are basically shared, you could say, between the 2 nodes. So they will not carry, both of them will not carry all of the data. So it's basically split up between the 2 nodes, whereas the 2 remaining availability zones with 1 node each will have all the replicas stored. If we quickly hop over to the debug page, there we have a page called Data Distribution and Zone Configs, which gives a little bit better visual representation. There you can see for, let's say, the mover database, where I will use a workload that's connected to the mover database. You can see same principles apply. In the availability zone B, we have 30 replicas. In C, we have 30 replicas. And in A, we have 15 and 15 replicas split between the 2 nodes, respectively. All right, if I now go ahead and you can see on the lower right-hand corner that I have the mover application, which is a built-in workload inside CockroachDB, just to have some actual workload running against the cluster while doing the self-healing demo. And B, I'm going to inject a failure into the system, which is going to take offline 1 of the nodes, in particular node 0, which is one of the nodes, or basically runs in availability zone that runs 2 of the nodes. So let me do that real quick. Inject the failure, and then it will take a couple of seconds before the cluster recognizes, oh, 1 node is missing, it's not reachable anymore. And then the node will change its status from live to suspect node, which basically means that the cluster is recognized, it cannot talk to the node anymore. And then there's a grace period where we just wait before we start any type of replication, because it could be a temporary problem and the node could come back a couple of seconds later. So we wait a little bit before we actually start replicating data. In the recording, I will obviously fast forward to the point where the node has been declared dead and go on from there. All right, now you can see that the node has been declared as dead, so we assume it's not coming back anytime soon. And actually, if we look at the replicas count, you see that the number for node 3 is already increasing. So the up replication has already begun. If we look at the metrics page, you can see also our workload just keeps on running. And if we go to the replication page and have a look at the replicas per node, you can see here quite nicely visualized that the number of replicas for node 3 is going up continuously. So the up replication process is taking place and will be finished once the number of replicas basically matches the number of replicas in the other availability zones, so that you end up with a scenario again where you have 3 healthy copies, which by the way is the default replication factor of CockroachDB, and so that your data is replicated 3 times and stored in all of the 3 availability zones respectively. Then let's go back to the overview page, and in a couple of seconds it will be done. Obviously, how long the process will take heavily depends on the size of your data set, so how large is your database and the networking. But in my scenario, with the barely filled database, it's a matter of seconds, maybe just a few minutes. Also, if you look on the upper right hand corner, you can also see the replication status, that we have 100 total ranges and there is just one under replicated range, and that's now down to 0. And if you look on the overview again, we can see that we now have 100 replicas evenly distributed across all the 3 availability zones. And well done, the cluster has self-healed itself without any type of operational activity, so to speak. So nobody would need to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning to fix things, to do a failover, or any type of other operational activity. It just worked its magic. All right, let's go one step further than that. We have still one failed node in one of the availability zones. We up-replicated the data automatically, so to restore the desired replication factor of 3, meaning having 3 copies distributed across the 3 availability zones. And now let's fail an additional node. And let's see what happens. We now should see that not only CockroachDB 0, but also CockroachDB -1 should be down, or at least unavailable, in a few seconds. And the important part is actually replication doesn't matter now, because there is no additional node, there's no free node where we could again up-replicate to. The important part is that the workload in the lower right hand corner just keeps on running. That is because we still have 2 of the 3 replicas available. We are still able to form quorum if you want to insert new data into the system. So as long as 2 out of 3 replicas are available, your data is available, the cluster is available, you can continue to operate, and your application doesn't need to fall over, basically. So what we saw, that the cluster was able to up-replicate, self-heal, and that's true as long as you have, let's say, more nodes than your configured replication factor, and that the configuration is able to up-replicate, given the fact that we had like 2 nodes within the same availability zone. So if one node goes down, we can just fine up-replicate using the remaining node. And now we can see that even though in the scenario where we actually had a replication factor of 3, which typically allows only the failure of 1 node at a time, we saw that due to the self-healing capabilities, the cluster survived basically another node outage after this self-healing process was completed. And with that, that's about it for today's resiliency demo and about the self-healing capabilities of CockroachDB.